title of the show is Warning Notes. It's an alarm sound. It's the sounds of warning about what is happening now, what has been happening for a long time in some respects, but now we're at a very, very distinct point, I think, in time, with climate change happening as well as the increased inequality, increasing in injustices around the world and in this country. In terms of politics, in terms of social change, in terms of climate change, I decided that's what I wanted to make the work about. Therefore, that's what it's about. And the way that we use that sound, I think, hopefully means that people do get a very different experience from the experiences that they're used to having in shows where, firstly, it's a front-on show. This is not a front-on show. The sound is coming from all different parts, and it is much more like walking into a different world rather than seeing something and watching it.
Dwi yn rhan o'r sioe Warning Notes. Dwi wedi bod yn sgwennu barddoniaeth yn ymateb i themau'r prosiect, ond hefyd yn ymateb i'r gwaith sain, a wedyn fe heini'n cael eu cynnwys fatha rhan o'r sioe. Mae heddiw'n ddiwrnod cyntaf dwi wedi cyrraedd ar y safle, wedyn mae gen i rhywfaint o waith sgwennu dwi wedi gwneud yn barod, a mae hwnna'n mynd i gael ei berfformio fatha rhan o'r sioe, a mae hwnna'n falle'n ymateb i themau'r sioe. Ond yn amlwg dwi'n wedi gweld y sioe eto, dwi'n wedi medru ymateb i'r oedd yn sain eto, lle wedyn dros y dyddiau nesaf fyddai'n ychwanegu at hwnna, ond yn ymateb falle'n fwy penodol i'r gosodiad ei hun, lle, a wedyn fydd y ddau yna'n cael eu plethu fewn i'r sioe nos Wener a nos Sadwrn.
We're at Blaenavon Ironworks, and it's now part of Cadw Heritage Site, but it's in some ways the start of the Industrial Revolution across Great Britain, but particularly for Wales. It's where they started some chemical process that meant that they could create a certain type of steel. They had all the raw materials here. For me, I think it signifies something about the change that occurred for people. And so what this show is about what is happening in the world in terms of climate change, and I think that climate change is inextricably linked with the rise of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution as a sort of part of that massive change that happened around that time.
Yn yr ardal yma, lle ddaru lot o'r datblygiadau mewn technoleg STEM a sydd i weithio fo dyr, lle nath arwain at dim jyst o ran technoleg y sefyllfa da ni'n heddiw, ond hefyd yr economi a'r gymdeithas gyfalafol, extractive, exploitative. Mae lot o'i fan geni fo yma yn y cymoedd, lle, ac yn y safle yma'n benodol, ac y bywyda nath o effeithio y bobl oedd yn gweithio yma, y bobl oedd yma cyn y gwaith, sydd oedd yn effeithio iechyd nhw, sydd oedd yn effeithio eu cymdeithas nhw. A fyd y Gymraeg, ardal lle mi oedd pawb yn siarad Cymraeg, a wedyn dros gyfnod yr chwyldro diwydiannol, lle mae'r ganran yna'n syrthio i tua, dwi'n meddwl bod o 9% heddiw, so wedyn i fi oedd hwnna'n teimlo'n rili perthnosol i Warning Notes, lle mae pethau fatha collapse ecolegol, felly bod nhw'n effeithio diwylliannau llywddiedig hefyd, lle dim jyst ddim jyst yn siarad am endangered species, da ni'n siarad am endangered cultures ac endangered languages hefyd mewn ffordd ydan. So mae'n teimlo fatha lleoliad rili arwyddocaol o ran wneud o'n fel yma.
People that worked here were slaves in effect. They were no different from any other, sort of wage slavery of sorts, and the conditions were horrendous. But it's also got something about it is that I actually do love metal. I love the processes that it goes through. I like fire, and I like that sort of slightly alchemical way that you can think of it, the sort of magic that happens. And the opportunity to do Warning Notes here will really bring strong resonances for the show and what we're trying to do. It's a significant site in the history of Wales, but overall for the whole Industrial Revolution. And what was going on here was reflected across the country in different places, working with the gradual mechanisation and increased exploitation and growth of a rich and powerful elite.
I've been working with Mark for about 20 years. Mark's got a workshop over near Machynlleth. So throughout the year I would go over to Mark's workshop and we would kind of work together there for maybe a week or 2 or 3 weeks at a time to kind of build the mechanisms that we've kind of got here.
I think we might have found... Yeah. I'll do the other two again, over the other side.
Mainly what I do is create a soundscape using all of the kind of controls I have ahead of me to create a soundscape that the audience will kind of sit and enjoy and kind of reside in and get people thinking about the topic of the show. Making people think about the environment and climate change, and so most of the instruments are related to sounds that make warning notes, that have been used to make warning notes. So bells and sirens are things that people associate with warnings, and birds, so birds chattering and bird calls are also signs of things to listen out for, and it's to give a place for contemplation, to think about the environment and ways in which we can all work together to make it better.
Seinydd rhyfel oer yma'n rhan canolog o'r gosodiad, a ma' hwnna'n ryw fath o drosiad am newid hinsawdd a be 'di'r arwyddion o newid hinsawdd a sut da ni'n dewis gwrando neu dewis anwybyddu yr arwyddion yna ag sbio arno fo o bersbectif fatha clywedol lle, so dim o reidrwydd be da ni'n ddarllen neu'n ddeall ar lefel fatha intellectual am newid hinsawdd, ond be 'di'r pethau falle sy'n effeithio ni'n fwy yn yr is-ymwybod a'r arwyddion, falle pethau fatha sain lle, yn newid yn y soundscape. Dyna rhai o'r themau o'n i'n sort of tynnu allan o'r gosodiad.
This is our control space where we have all the kind of elements that operate all the individual installation, and so we have at our disposal lighting desk that operates the voltage for the whistles, and we have lots of MIDI controls and switches that will be operating all of the actual individual solenoids, and a mixing desk and the laptop for all the sound control. We play a kind of an improvised set, so for this particular performance we have a 40 to 45 minute time slot, so we've kind of actually scheduled it to kind of run in some order, but within that order there's lots of room for us to kind of be quite playful. So if we find moments where things are quite still and quiet, we can kind of improvise with any of the controls that we've got here. And we have the performers who are waiting for specific cues, so there are times when we bring on particular elements of the installation in order to give the performers their cues, but the remainder of the time we're kind of operating kind of live. All of the sound, the explosions, the siren and the whistles and the bells are all kind of operating live. Most of the elements that are out there at the moment are kind of operated by solenoids, and some of those solenoids, actually the majority of the solenoids, have kind of come from recycle centres. So for example, some of the solenoids that are operating some of the installations are old from bars that operate the fluid that comes out of the fuel tanks. So we've kind of recycled those solenoids and we operate the controls that turn on and off the solenoids to operate the instruments. So they're all kind of hand built, all of the things on the saw blades and on there's cogs on the bells, which have kind of been handmade and built onto motors, which mostly have been recycled, and all of the whistles are made from bits of vacuum motors, which have all been upcycled to be turned into a whistle and added on some old pipe. And even some of the infrastructure, such as the tree that houses the birds, is being taken from an old forest where it had been set on fire and was felled, and so now it is part of the infrastructure. Here in Blaenavon is a kind of an opportunity for us to do something different. So we're working with two performers, which is something that we haven't done before in warning notes, previous warning notes performances. It would be really good to come and see what the two performers bring to the show, where they kind of bring a whole new dimension to what warning notes is about.
God, I mean, God knows what it sounded like here.
Yeah, I keep thinking that air must have been so thick.
Yeah.
Because I remember it as a kid growing up, coming through the valleys. There was no A470. You still had to go through, you know, Aberfan and all that to go anywhere, really.
Yeah.
And so I remember the thickness of the air.
So when you're working with sound, we can't actually put I can't put it into words. The reason I'm building the show out of sound is because I don't consider myself a great person for working with words, and what I do is I make work, I make shows, and it's that searching for that magic, that bit that is in between consciousness and thought processes and things, and that other thing that happens where you feel it in your gut. You have images and sounds. I have images and sounds in my head that I'm trying to translate, but they're out the corner of my eye. They're not here, and I'm always aware that that's what I'm aiming for. But if I turn to look at them, they disappear. And so the whole piece is like what you can possibly glimpse, and I'm hoping that also the audience just possibly glimpse possible change, possible ways of thinking about things differently, possible place to contemplate things, but from a different perspective, because we're so used to our perspective is so channeled through media and through now through social media and electronic devices, and this is the opposite of all that. A lot of the sound in it is extremely raw and acoustic. There is some amplification, but the majority of the sound is acoustic, and we're working with really with lumps of sound, with lumps of stuff, much in the same way that you might have done with steel or something like that. I think that we can reshape the world, but I don't think we can do it without a true revolution. Because I think that what we're doing at the moment, in terms of what governments and what people are talking about doing in terms of climate change, is still always seen within the context of inequality and exploitation for profit and for power. And this is a classic place where you can see it everywhere. You go into the houses where people were living on the site, and you look at the way that they were continually exploited, and no one cared, you know. And that's the case from all over the sort of Wales, England, in any country. You'll see those same power relationships existing, that same exploitation for power and wealth. It almost feels an impossible task at the point we are at the moment. There is so much that needs to change, and it doesn't feel like people can even glimpse the possibility that it can change, and can't see another way that we could possibly have social relations differently and power relationships different. So it's a much more egalitarian world.
Roedd y muriau, roedd sŵn y môr yn y dechreuad. Dechreuad yr oedd mecaneiddiad. Yr oedd coed Glyn Cynnon, dan fwyell y merodref. Mwyaf aslu dan yr oedd yr iaith, yr oedd yn 100%.
Ond ei glywyd i'r sorod, glywyd i'r sibrwd, glywyd i farw'r iaith, glywyd i farw ieithoedd, glywyd i eiriau'n llosgi, glywyd i'r torri ar eich dynnu, a'r arbrofi ar sylweddau, glywyd i'r llais, y llyncu, y pyswch heill yn hollti ysgyfaint, glywyd i'r peiriannau gnio yn Bangladesh, a glyw'r plant sy'n gyda'i pwytha drwy polyester brau. Glywyd i'r ffwrnisi, glywyd i'r gwres, glywyd i'r dŵr yn codi, glywyd i arogl yr ager gwyn, y corameibion, glywyd i'r canu calon lan yn seinio tink ar hyd yr oriau, glywyd i'r tanchwa, glywyd i'r gwynt drwy frigan moes, glywyd i beiriannau tanio mewnol, glywyd i'r glaw, glywyd i'r byd, wedi'r bydiau. Ist. Pan i glywyd i'r tawelwch mawr. Pan i glywyd i lwch hir mynda. Pan i glywyd i'r geiriau coll. Pan i glywyd i sŵn creu bygoedd, baldor, tân a ffwrnais. Pan i glywyd i'r gair. Pan i glywyd i'r derw. Pan i glywyd i'r bydwn hollti. Glywyd i heiar na'r lignin a chydwlos. Pan i glywyd i'r frymwen yn yr afon a'r gryf yn llosgi llythra'r bryn. Ist. Pan i glywyd i'r sorod, glywyd i'r sibrwd, glywyd i farw'r iaith, glywyd i farw ieithoedd, glywyd i eiriau'r llosgi, glywyd i'r torri ar eich dynnu, ar arbrofi ar sylwedda, glywyd i'r llais, y llyncu, y peswch heill yn hollti ysgyfaint, glywyd i y peiriannau gnio yn Bangladesh a glywyd plant yn gyrru pwytha drwy polyester brau, glywyd i'r ffwrnais, glywyd i'r gwres, glywyd i'r dŵr yn codi, glywyd i arogl yr ager gwyn, y corameibion, glywyd i'r canu calon lan yn seinio, tink, ar hyd yr oriau, glywyd i'r tanchwa, glywyd i'r gwynt drwy frigan moes, glywyd i beiriannau tanio mewnol, glywyd i'r glaw, glywyd i'r byd, wedi'r bydiaw. ar y glo. Yn y dechreuad, yr oedd mecaneiriad, yr oedd injan stêm a pheiriant gwnïo a llafur plant. Yn y dechreuad, yr oedd ymwynau brig, yr oedd isadeiledd cymdeithasol hanfodol, yr oedd drwydwr glân a nentydd bydyr a chwrw bach. Yn y dechreuad, yr oedd yr iaith, yr oedd yn 100%, yr oedd yn 67%, yr oedd yn 9.25%. Yn y dechreuad, yn y dechreuad, yn y dechreuad.
Every crack in the ground. Too often I am left lonely, living in the solitude of the truth. Small talk coils itself around my body, squeezes, till my lungs are hot and I am floppy without meaning. This is where I forget myself.